The night my house burned down, it felt like the world itself had decided to erase me. The air was heavy with the smell of rain that never came, and the wind whispered against the old shutters like it was trying to warn me. I had just finished washing the dinner dishes and was sitting by the window with a cup of chamomile tea, watching the reflection of the streetlights on the wet pavement. It was one of those evenings that felt both lonely and peaceful, the kind that makes you think too much about the past. I was 62, widowed for 7 years, and had spent most of those years trying to keep the same little house that Henry and I had bought when we were newly married. The walls still smelled faintly of his aftershave if I closed my eyes long enough. I had pictures of our children on every shelf, and the old grandfather clock in the hall still ticked with the same rhythm it had since the day we brought it home. Life wasn't easy, but it was mine. Quiet, predictable, and safe. Or so I thought. It started with a faint crackling sound, like someone unwrapping paper in the next room. At first, I ignored it, thinking it was just the old heater acting up again. But then came the smell, sharp, metallic, and unmistakable. Burning. My heart skipped. I set my cup down, stood up too fast, and nearly knocked over the chair as I hurried down the hall. The glow from the living room was wrong, too bright, too alive. When I pushed the door open, the world seemed to explode in front of me. Flames were crawling up the curtains, licking the ceiling like hungry beasts. The air was thick and angry, and in seconds, I was coughing so hard, my chest felt like it would burst. I ran for the fire extinguisher under the sink, but by the time I got back, the fire had already spread across the old rug Henry loved so much. It was as if the house itself was breathing, pulling the fire deeper into its heart. Panic has a strange sound. It doesn't scream. It hums. I remember fumbling for my phone on the kitchen counter, my hands shaking so badly that I dropped it twice. My voice broke as I tried to call 911, my throat raw from the smoke. I could hear the operator asking me for my address, but the room was spinning, and all I could think was that I couldn't lose this place. Not the house where Henry had laughed, where our son took his first steps, where every birthday candle had been blown out with hope. I stumbled toward the back door, coughing and blinded by smoke, and grabbed the nearest thing I could find, my purse, sitting on the counter beside the half-eaten loaf of bread. The moment my hand touched the doorknob, it burned. I yelped, covering my hand with my sleeve, forcing the door open with my shoulder. The rush of cold night air hit me like a slap. Outside, the world was quiet, indifferent. The stars blinked down as if nothing had happened. I turned just in time to see the living room windows burst outward, glass raining across the yard like diamonds from a broken sky. Neighbors were running out, shouting my name, their faces pale in the orange light. Someone was already calling the fire department. I stood there, barefoot, on the cold grass, watching 40 years of my life disappear in a roar of smoke and light. The fire climbed fast, greedy, unstoppable. I could hear the walls collapsing inside, the sound of wood cracking, of memories breaking apart. The air was thick with ash and the faint smell of the lemon-scented polish I used every Sunday morning. That scent would haunt me later, because it was the last trace of my home before it turned to dust. Mrs. Darnell, the neighbor from across the street, ran over with a blanket and threw it around my shoulders. "Oh, Margaret, are you okay?" She kept asking, her hands trembling as much as mine. I nodded, though the word okay felt like a lie I couldn't even finish. I wasn't hurt, not on the outside, but something inside me had caught fire too. The fire trucks arrived in what felt like forever, but must have been 10 minutes. Red lights painted the night, sirens wailed, and men in heavy coats rushed past me shouting instructions. I stood still, numb, as water sprayed over what used to be my home. Steam rose like ghosts leaving the earth. It took an hour to put it out. By the time the last ember was smothered, the house was nothing but black skeletons of what used to be my furniture, my curtains, my life. One of the firefighters, a young man with kind eyes, came over and said softly, "Ma'am, we're sorry. There's nothing to save." He might as well have told me I'd lost a part of myself I'd never get back. He offered to call someone for me, but who would I call? My son was living overseas, and my husband had been gone for years. There was only one person left, my younger brother Tom. We hadn't been close since Henry's funeral. Life had pulled us in different directions, and pride had kept us there. But in that moment, pride didn't matter. Family was all I had left. I spent the rest of that night sitting on the curb, watching the smoke rise into the stars, clutching my melted phone in my lap. The world felt cruelly silent after all the chaos. The firefighters eventually left and the neighbors went back inside, their lights blinking off one by one. I was alone with the ruins. Somewhere deep inside, I felt a flicker of something that wasn't grief, something harder, determination maybe. I told myself I'd rebuild, that this wasn't the end. But as the first drops of rain began to fall, washing away the ashes, I realized how small I really was in the face of it all. My home was gone, my memories burned, and the only person I could turn to was someone who might not even want me there. Still, I whispered into the cold air, "Tom, I hope you'll open your door." The morning after the fire felt unreal, like I had woken up inside someone else's nightmare. Smoke still lingered in the air, a ghost of everything I'd lost. The smell of burnt wood clung to my skin, my hair, even my breath. I sat on the curb across from what was once my front porch, staring at the blackened bones of the house that had once held my entire life. Every board, every nail, every photograph, gone. The sky was pale gray, and the ashes on the ground looked like snow. I should have cried, but my tears had dried up hours ago, replaced by a dull ache that seemed to live in my chest. The Red Cross van had come by earlier, offering blankets and a voucher for a motel, but I couldn't bring myself to leave yet. It felt like abandoning Henry all over again. This was where we had lived, laughed, fought, loved. How could I just walk away? When the insurance adjuster finally arrived, he spoke with that cold professionalism people use when they don't know how to comfort you. He walked around with a clipboard, taking pictures, jotting notes, and nodding as if I were a case file, not a person. "I'll be honest, ma'am," he said finally, looking up from his paper. "This is a total loss. It'll take some time, but we'll do what we can to process your claim." His words floated over me like smoke. Total loss. Two words that somehow managed to erase 4 decades of living. I wanted to scream, to ask him if he understood what that meant. That it wasn't just wood and glass that burned, but birthdays, wedding anniversaries, Christmas mornings, laughter echoing down hallways now turned to soot. But instead, I just nodded because there was nothing else to do. By noon, Mrs. Darnell came back with a thermos of coffee and a sandwich wrapped in foil. "You can stay at my place for a night or two if you need to, honey," she said softly, her old eyes kind, but I saw the truth behind her smile. Her little house was already full with visiting grandchildren. I didn't want to be a burden. I thanked her, hugged her, and told her I'd figure something out. But when she walked away, I realized I had no plan. My savings weren't much, and the insurance money would take weeks. I needed a place to sleep, somewhere familiar. That's when I thought of Tom, my younger brother, the only family I had left. I hadn't spoken to Tom in almost 2 years. After Henry's funeral, he stopped calling, and I was too proud to chase him. We'd been close once when we were kids, growing up in that tiny farmhouse with no central heating. Tom used to sneak me extra slices of bread when we were hungry, or chase away the neighbors' boys when they teased me. He was the one person who always made me feel safe. But life changes people. After he married Sandra and moved to Atlanta, our calls grew shorter, our visits less frequent. I told myself it was distance, not indifference. But sitting there now, wrapped in a smoke-stained blanket, I wondered if maybe I had just been fooling myself. I pulled my half-melted phone out of my purse and pressed the power button, but the screen stayed black. Dead, of course. The fire had taken even that. Mrs. Darnell, bless her heart, let me use her landline. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely dial the number I'd memorized years ago. The phone rang twice before I heard his voice, deeper than I remembered, calm, professional. Hello, Tom speaking. For a moment, I couldn't say anything. My throat tightened. When I finally found my voice, it came out as a whisper. Tom, it's me. It's Maggie. He paused, a note of surprise in his tone. Maggie? Wow, it's been a while. Are you okay? I tried to steady my breath. Not really. There was a fire. The house is gone. Everything's gone. Another pause. I could hear the faint sound of traffic behind him, maybe the city noise through his open window. Oh my God, he said finally, his voice low. Were you hurt? No, I whispered. Just shaken, but I don't have anywhere to go right now. Could I maybe stay with you for a bit? Just until I figure things out? The silence that followed was so long, I thought the line had dropped. My heart started to pound. Then he spoke again softly. Of course, Maggie. Don't be silly. You're my sister. Come here. We'll figure it out together. Relief hit me so hard that I nearly dropped the phone. Thank you, Tom. I didn't know who else to call. He gave a small laugh. You don't have to thank me. Family takes care of family, right? For the first time since the fire, I smiled. Maybe the flames had burned away more than wood and memories. Maybe they had burned away the distance between us, too. I could already picture his house in my mind. The big white porch, the maple tree in the yard, the faint smell of his wife's expensive candles that always gave me a headache. It would be strange to stay there, but at least it would be safe. Maybe, I thought, this tragedy was God's way of forcing us to find our way back to each other. Mrs. Darnell helped me pack what little I had left, an old coat someone had loaned me, my purse, and the Red Cross bag with a few donated clothes. Before I left, I turned one last time to look at my house. The walls were gone, the roof had caved in, but I could still see the shape of my kitchen in my mind, the sunlight that used to pour through the curtains every morning. I whispered goodbye under my breath, the words catching in my throat. Then I climbed into the cab that was taking me to the bus station. The drive away from the neighborhood felt like leaving a graveyard. Every corner, every tree, every streetlight held a memory. I pressed my forehead against the window, watching as the city disappeared behind me. For a moment, I closed my eyes and tried to imagine what Tom's hug would feel like after all this time. Maybe this was my second chance. To rebuild, to forgive, to belong again. I didn't know then that the hardest part wasn't behind me. It was waiting for me. Standing on the porch of my brother's perfect house, smiling a smile that wasn't meant for me. The bus ride to Atlanta took almost 6 hours, but it felt longer. Every bump in the road shook through my body, every passing town blurred into the next. I kept my hands wrapped tightly around the strap of my bag, as if letting go would mean losing the little I had left. The rhythmic hum of the engine should have been comforting, but my mind wouldn't rest. I kept replaying that night in my head, the crackling sound of fire devouring my walls, the screams of neighbors, the flashing red lights, and now Tom's voice on the phone. "You're my sister. We'll figure it out together." Those words were my lifeline. I clung to them the way a drowning person clings to a piece of driftwood, believing that family meant safety, that his house meant peace. When I finally stepped off the bus, the city air felt heavier, richer, laced with car exhaust, roasted coffee, and the faint scent of rain. I hadn't been to Atlanta in years, and the skyline seemed foreign, almost intimidating. I spotted Tom waiting near the curb, leaning against his black SUV. For a moment, my heart lifted. He looked older, a little grayer at the temples, but his smile, at least at first, was the same. He opened his arms, and I walked straight into them. His hug was firm but brief, like he was trying to be comforting without wrinkling his freshly ironed shirt. "It's good to see you, Maggie," he said, pulling back. "You look tired." I laughed softly. "That's one word for it." "Well," he said, grabbing my bag, "let's get you home." That word, home, hit me unexpectedly hard. For a moment, I almost cried again, but I swallowed it down. Maybe this was what home could feel like again. Maybe this was the start of healing. The drive to his neighborhood was quiet. Tom made small talk about work, his car, the new development near his office. I nodded, tried to listen, but my thoughts drifted. When he pulled into the driveway, I saw the kind of house that belonged on magazine covers. Wide white columns, a manicured lawn, and flower beds arranged in perfect symmetry. Sandra always did love perfection. She was waiting at the door when we walked up the steps. Sandra, tall, blonde, polished, the kind of woman who looked expensive just standing still. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes when she saw me. "Oh, Maggie, what a surprise," she said, her voice light but her gaze sharp. "Hi, Sandra. I really appreciate you letting me stay. Oh, nonsense," she interrupted, waving a perfectly manicured hand. "Family always comes first, right?" But there was something about the way she said it that made my stomach twist. The inside of the house was just as perfect as I remembered. Gleaming marble floors, white furniture that looked untouched, candles burning in every corner. I felt suddenly self-conscious, aware of the soot still embedded under my fingernails, the smoke smell that clung to my clothes despite the borrowed sweater. Sandra led me upstairs to the guest room. "Here you go," she said, opening the door. The room was immaculate. Crisp white sheets, a vase of artificial flowers on the nightstand, and a large frame photo of their family smiling at a beach resort. "Make yourself comfortable. Just be careful with the comforter. It's new." I nodded, pretending not to notice how she subtly opened a window, letting the breeze carry my smoke-stained scent away. "Of course," I said softly. That night, as I lay in the bed that felt too soft, too clean, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house reminded me that I didn't belong there. The laughter downstairs, the sound of wine glasses clinking, the muffled music, all of it came from a world I no longer fit into. I pulled the covers up to my chin and whispered a small prayer. "Please, God, just let this be temporary." The next morning, Tom knocked gently before peeking in. "Morning, sis. Coffee's ready." When I came downstairs, he was sitting at the table, already dressed for work. Sandra was pouring coffee, her smile thinner today. "Sleep well?" she asked. "Mostly," I said. "Thanks again for taking me in." She gave a little shrug. "Of course. I told Tom it was the right thing to do. I mean, we can't just let you struggle." Her tone made the word struggle sound like something contagious. Tom shot her a quick look, but said nothing. I smiled tightly and focused on my coffee, which suddenly tasted bitter. Later, when they both left for work, I wandered around the house quietly, trying not to touch anything. Every surface gleamed, every pillow was placed perfectly. I felt like an intruder in a museum. When I passed their family photos, vacations, birthdays, celebrations, I realized I wasn't in single one of them. It stung, more than I wanted to admit. That evening, Tom came home late. I waited up, eager to talk, to share the plans I had started making, maybe getting a small apartment once the insurance came through, maybe finding part-time work. But when he finally walked in, he looked exhausted. "Rough day?" I asked. He sighed, loosening his tie. "Yeah, and Sandra's, well, she's worried, Maggie. She didn't expect this to be long term." My stomach dropped. Long term? I never said it would be. I just need a few weeks. I know, he said quickly. It's just, you know how she gets. The house, the routines. She likes things in order. I nodded, but inside, something cracked. I'd lost everything, and now even my brother's house, my last refuge, felt like it was slipping away. "Tell her not to worry," I said finally. "I'll start looking for a place tomorrow." Tom looked guilty. "You don't have to rush." "Yes, I do," I said softly. "I don't want to make things harder for you." That night, I lay awake again, staring at the ceiling. The kindness I had imagined in his voice on the phone now felt like a fragile echo. The house was warm, but I had never felt colder. When I heard muffled voices downstairs, Sandra's sharp tone, Tom's quiet replies, I strained to listen. "She can't stay here, Tom. This isn't a charity." "She just lost her home," Tom whispered. "She's my sister." "That's not our problem." The words hit me like a slap. My chest tightened, tears welling in my eyes. I turned away, pressing my face into the pillows so they wouldn't hear the quiet sound of my heart breaking. That was the first night I realized that sometimes losing your home doesn't just mean losing a roof. It can also mean realizing that the people you thought were your shelter were never really walls that could hold you. They were just doors that would close when you needed them most. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Sleep had become a stranger to me. Every dream seemed to replay the same loss, the same fire swallowing my memories whole. I got out of bed quietly, determined not to be a burden. Maybe if I helped around the house, Sandra would soften. I went downstairs, made coffee, and began washing the breakfast dishes they'd left in the sink. The warm water felt grounding somehow, a small act of usefulness in a world that had taken everything from me. Sandra walked in mid-morning, dressed in yoga clothes and holding her phone. She froze when she saw me cleaning. "Oh," she said flatly, "you really don't need to do that. We have someone come in for that." I smiled gently. "It's no trouble. I just like keeping busy." She hesitated, then muttered something like, "Suit yourself," and went to the living room. From the corner of my eye, I saw her watching me, not with gratitude, but suspicion, as if my being kind was somehow invasive. Later that afternoon, Tom came home early from work. He looked distracted, a deep line between his brows. "Hey, Maggie," he said. "You holding up okay?" "I'm trying," I replied, forcing a smile. "I was thinking of visiting the insurance office tomorrow. Maybe I can get the paperwork moving faster." He nodded but didn't really hear me. "Yeah, good idea. Just don't stress too much." It was strange. Every time we talked about the fire, he grew distant, like he couldn't bear to look at me for too long. I thought maybe the sight of me reminded him of our parents' house, of the childhood we once shared. Back before money, before ambition, before Sandra came into the picture and turned him into someone I barely recognized. That evening, as we sat down for dinner, I tried to lighten the mood. remember the summer we tried to build a tree house in the backyard? I laughed softly. Dad told us it would fall apart within a week. Tom smiled faintly. Yeah, we were stubborn. Sandra didn't laugh. She was scrolling on her phone, pretending not to hear. The silence that followed was thick. Finally, she spoke without looking up. Tom, we need to talk about the situation. My stomach dropped. What situation? I asked. She gave a tight smile. It's nothing, Maggie, just logistics. You've been here a while, and we just want to make sure everyone's comfortable. I've only been here 6 days, I said softly. Exactly, she said, her voice sharp now. And we're not running a long-term guest house. Tom put down his fork, sighing. Sandra? No, Tom, she snapped. We need boundaries. I have my clients coming next week, and I can't have this. This. The word hit harder than it should have, as if I was a stain on her perfect furniture. I looked at Tom, hoping he would stand up for me. His only sister, his blood. But he just rubbed his temples and muttered, "Let's talk later." The rest of dinner was silent. The only sounds were the clink of silverware and the slow breaking of something inside me. That night, I stayed up in the guest room, staring out the window. The garden below glowed under the porch lights, a perfectly trimmed world that wasn't mine. My brother's voice echoed from downstairs, low and tense. I could only catch pieces. She has nowhere else to go, Sandra. She's not our responsibility, Tom. You promised we'd have peace. You promised no drama. I just need some time to figure it out. Figure it out. That's what people say when they don't have the courage to do the right thing. The next morning, I decided to help by cooking breakfast. Real breakfast, the kind Mom used to make. Pancakes, scrambled eggs, toast, even fresh juice. I wanted to remind Tom of where we came from, of warmth and family. But when Sandra came down and saw the spread, her expression turned to stone. "What's all this?" she asked. "Just breakfast," I said, smiling. I told you, we don't eat heavy food in the mornings." Tom walked in, smelling the coffee, looking hopeful for a half second before catching Sandra's glare. "Smells great," he said quietly, then glanced at her and added, "But maybe it's too much." That's when I realized he was afraid of her. My little brother, the same boy who once stood up to bullies for me, now couldn't stand up to his own wife. And I, who had come to him seeking shelter, had become the thing that tested his weakness. The days that followed grew colder. Sandra barely spoke to me, except to leave polite, clipped instructions. "Please don't use the laundry during the day," or "Could you stay upstairs while my friends visit?" Tom tried to bridge the silence, but guilt weighed so heavily it made every word awkward. Then one evening, I overheard something that made my heart freeze. I was walking past Tom's office, the door slightly ajar. His voice was low, tired. "Yes, I know. I just haven't told her yet," he said into the phone. A pause. "I can't keep her here much longer. The insurance money came through already. She doesn't need us anymore." Insurance money? My chest tightened. I hadn't received a single update, not a letter, not a call. Confusion mixed with dread. I stepped back before he could see me and went to my room. My hands trembled as I replayed his words. He knew. He'd gotten the check, or at least heard from the company. But instead of telling me, he'd stayed silent. Why? That night, I found the courage to ask him. "Tom," I said quietly after dinner, "did you hear anything from my insurance company?" He froze mid-bite. "What? No, why would I?" I just thought maybe they contacted you by mistake. I haven't heard from them yet. He forced a laugh. Oh, no, I haven't heard anything. Don't worry, it takes time. But I saw it. The flicker in his eyes, the quick glance toward Sandra. That was the moment I knew something was terribly wrong. After they went to bed, I sat by the window again, the house silent except for the ticking of the clock. I realized I'd traded the ashes of my home for the cold marble of theirs, and both were suffocating in their own way. I whispered into the dark, I lost my home once. Please don't let me lose my family too. But deep down, I already knew. One of those losses had already begun. The next few days passed in a fog of uneasy silence. I tried to act normal, smiling through breakfast, pretending not to notice Sandra's passive-aggressive comments, keeping to my room when they had guests. But inside, something gnawed at me. That phone call I'd overheard from Tom wouldn't stop replaying in my mind. The insurance money came through already. Those words didn't fit. How could they have come through when I hadn't received a single notification? That morning, while Sandra was out meeting her clients and Tom was at work, I decided to make a call of my own. My hands trembled as I dialed the insurance company, giving them my name, my address, my policy number, all the details burned into my memory. The woman on the other end was polite, her voice steady. "Yes, Mrs. Thompson," she said after a moment, typing something into her system. "I see your claim was processed last week." My heart skipped. Processed? Yes, it was finalized and paid out 3 days ago. Paid out? I whispered, but I haven't received anything. There was a pause. According to our records, the payment was issued via direct deposit to your listed account. My account? Yes, ma'am, the account ending in 4731. I froze. That wasn't my account number. Can you repeat that? I asked, my voice trembling. She did. The numbers were close, only off by 2 digits, but they weren't mine. My heart started pounding so hard I could barely hear her next words. It appears the account details were updated 2 weeks ago. We sent a confirmation letter to your address. My address burned down, I said, my voice cracking. I never got any letter. The woman hesitated, concern creeping into her tone. Mrs. Thompson, if you believe this change was unauthorized, you'll need to file a fraud report immediately. Fraud. The word echoed through my head like thunder. I thanked her, hung up the phone, and sat in stunned silence. My hands were shaking so badly I could hardly hold a receiver. 2 digits off. 2 digits that had rerouted my life savings, the compensation for everything I'd lost, into someone else's hands. But who? That night, I watched Tom carefully. We ate in silence again, Sandra scrolling through her phone, Tom lost in thought. My eyes fell on his watch, the one he hadn't worn before. A sleek silver piece that probably cost more than my old car. My stomach twisted. The timing, the call, the lies. Everything started connecting like cruel puzzle pieces. After dinner, when they went upstairs, I stayed behind under the pretense of cleaning up. My hands shook as I reached for Tom's briefcase, the one he always left by the door. I hesitated for a moment, guilt flooding in, but something inside me whispered, "You deserve to know the truth." I opened it slowly. Inside were stacks of paperwork, business files, and one envelope that made my heart stop. It was from my insurance company, my name printed neatly across the front. I opened it with trembling fingers. The letter inside confirmed everything. Claim approved, funds transferred to the provided account ending in 4731. I felt my knees go weak. He had done it. My own brother had changed my bank details, taken the money meant to rebuild my life. I stumbled to my room, closing the door quietly before collapsing on the bed. Terrors blurred my vision as I clutched the letter. My brother, the boy I had raised after our parents died, the man I trusted when I had nowhere else to turn, had stolen from me. For a long time, I couldn't move. The betrayal was too heavy, too sharp. It wasn't just about the money. It was about what it meant. He hadn't just taken my home. He had taken my faith in love, in family, in goodness itself. I remembered every sacrifice I'd made for him. The nights I stayed up helping him study, the years I paid part of his college tuition when he was struggling, the time I skipped vacation so I could send him money for his first car. And this was how he repaid me, with deceit wrapped in silence. When I finally stood up, my body felt hollow, like my spirit had drained out through my tears. I wanted to scream, to confront him right then, but I didn't. Not yet. I wanted to see how far he would go. The next morning, I acted as if nothing had changed. I smiled at breakfast, thanked Sandra for the toast, even made small talk. But inside, I was watching him. Every twitch, every word, every lie. When he left for work, I followed him. It was reckless, maybe even foolish, but I needed proof. I borrowed Sandra's spare car keys. She'd left them on the counter, and drove carefully behind his SUV, staying far enough not to be noticed. He didn't go straight to work. Instead, he stopped by a downtown bank. I parked across the street, my heart racing as I saw him step out, envelope in hand, the same one I had seen last night. He went inside, stayed about 10 minutes, and came out smiling. That was all the confirmation I needed. When I returned to the house, I went straight to my room, closed the door, and cried harder than I ever had in my life. It wasn't just grief, it was the collapse of everything I believed in. When he came home that evening, pretending everything was normal, I couldn't even look at him. I sat through dinner in silence, nodding occasionally, waiting for the right moment. Sandra talked about her clients. Tom agreed, laughed. He even offered to pour me wine, as if nothing had happened. When he set the glass down in front of me, I looked up, meeting his eyes for the first time all day. I said to him, "Tell me, Tom, does betrayal taste sweeter when it comes from blood?" He froze, the color draining from his face. "What?" I reached into my sweater and pulled out the letter. I slid it across the table. "From the insurance company, the one you opened, the one with my name on it." Sandra looked between us, confused, then horrified as she read the letter. "Tom, what is this?" He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Just silence. Guilt hung in the air like smoke. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping the marble floor. I said to him, "You could have told me. You could have said you needed help. I would have given you everything. But you chose to take it, behind my back." Tears filled his eyes, but I wasn't sure if they were for me or for himself. I turned away, my heart breaking in a way the fire never could. Losing my house was painful, but losing my brother, that was unbearable. As I walked out into the cool night, I whispered to the wind, "Family doesn't always burn your house. Sometimes they burn your soul." The silence after my words was suffocating. It stretched through the room like an invisible fog, heavy and unrelenting. Tom stood frozen by the table, eyes wide, mouth half open, while Sandra stared at the letter as though it might catch fire in her hands. I could almost hear the sound of his guilt cracking beneath his polished composure. "Maggie, please," he started, his voice low and trembling. "I didn't mean, it wasn't supposed to happen this way." I laughed bitterly. "Wasn't supposed to happen? You stole from me, Tom. You took what little I had left after losing everything." He reached for me, but I stepped back. The look in his eyes, part regret, part desperation, made me want to crumble, but anger held me upright. Sandra stood, pushing her chair back sharply. "Tom, you said it was from a family fund. You told me it was money your father left." He turned toward her, panic flashing in his face. "Sandra, please. I thought I'd fix it before anyone found out. I just—" "Fix it?" I snapped. "How do you fix betrayal, Tom? With an apology, a receipt, a lie on top of another?" The room felt too small to hold the weight of our history. Every memory we'd shared, every laugh, every holiday, every comforting word after Dad's funeral now felt tainted. I could almost hear the sound of his guilt cracking beneath his polished composure. I lost everything in that fire, I said, my voice breaking. Everything I owned, everything I built, and I thought I still had one thing left: family. But I was wrong. She turned away, muttering under her breath, "I can't believe this." She stormed out of the kitchen, her heels clicking angrily across the floor. Tom sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator, steady and cold. Finally, I whispered, "Why, Tom?" He lifted his head slowly. I I was drowning, Maggie. The business was failing, the mortgage, Sandra's spending, the pressure. I thought if I just borrowed it, just for a little while, I could fix everything before you even noticed. I shook my head. You didn't borrow it, you stole it. I was going to give it back, he insisted, his voice cracking. I just needed time. You had time, I said softly. You had years. But when I needed you for one moment, just one, you chose yourself. I picked up the letter, folded it carefully, and slipped it into my purse. He watched me, helpless, his lips trembling. He said, "Please don't leave like this. We can figure it out together." I paused, my back to him. You already figured it out without me, Tom. When I walked toward the door, I felt an ache, so deep it was almost physical. Every step away from him felt like tearing off a piece of my own heart. I heard him call my name once, softly, like a broken prayer. But I didn't turn around. Outside, the night was quiet. The air was cool, the streetlights humming softly, casting long shadows across the driveway. I stood there for a moment, looking up at the sky. It was the same sky that had watched over me through every chapter of my life, through love, loss, and now betrayal. Somehow, it made me feel small but not invisible. I walked down the driveway, no plan in mind, no destination. My suitcase was light, but my heart carried the weight of a lifetime. I ended up at a small diner by the highway, one of those places that never closes. The neon sign flickered weakly, and the air smelt like coffee and onions. I sat in a corner booth, staring out the window. A waitress with kind eyes brought me a cup of coffee without asking. "You look like you've had a long night," she said gently. I smiled faintly. You could say that. For a while, I just sat there, sipping coffee and watching cars pass by. Each one carried people going somewhere: home, work, maybe to loved ones waiting for them. I had nowhere to go, no one waiting. But strangely, amid that emptiness, I felt something stir inside me, something fragile but real: freedom. For years, I had lived surrounded by walls, first the walls of my home, then the invisible walls of family expectations, guilt, and loyalty. But now, sitting in that lonely diner at 2 a.m., I realized those walls had burned down too. And maybe, just maybe, that wasn't entirely a bad thing. When the waitress came back to refill my cup, I asked her if there was a small motel nearby. She nodded, pointing down the road. Cheap but clean. The owner's an old lady, kind as they come. I thanked her, paid for my coffee with the last few bills in my purse, and walked out into the night again. The wind carried the faint scent of rain. I didn't have a home, but I still had a heartbeat, a mind that could dream, and hands that could rebuild. As I walked toward the motel's dimly lit sign, I thought about something my mother once told me. Sometimes God burns down what you think you need to give you what you truly deserve. I didn't know what I deserved anymore: forgiveness, justice, or peace. But I knew I couldn't find it standing still. When I finally reached the motel, the old woman at the front desk gave me a room key with a smile. "Rough day?" she asked. I nodded. "You could say it's been a long one." "Well," she said kindly, "the bed is soft and the walls are quiet. Sometimes that's all you need to start over." In that moment, I realized something powerful. Starting over doesn't always begin with joy. Sometimes it begins with ashes, with walking away from the people who were supposed to love you and choosing, finally, to love yourself instead. That night, as I lay in the small, clean bed, tears rolled silently down my cheeks. But they weren't just tears of pain, they were tears of release. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I slept without fear. And somewhere in the quiet rhythm of my breathing, I found the faint echo of something I thought I'd lost forever: hope. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the thin motel curtains, warming the edge of the bed where I lay. For a moment, I didn't remember where I was. My body ached, my heart still bruised from the night before, but there was something peaceful in not waking up to smoke, to shouting, or to Tom's guilty eyes. Just silence and the hum of life outside. I sat up slowly, rubbing my temples. The motel room was small but tidy: faded wallpaper, a chipped dresser, and a little table by the window where someone had placed a single flower in a glass jar. It wasn't much, but it was mine. No expectations, no pity, no betrayal, just a space that didn't judge me. After a quick shower, I stepped outside. The air was crisp, and the scent of wet pavement told me it had rained overnight. Across the street, the diner from last night buzzed with morning chatter: truck drivers, travelers, and locals starting their day. Something about that simple normalcy felt comforting, so I decided to go back. The waitress, the same woman from last night, smiled when she saw me. "Hey, it's you again. Coffee?" I nodded. "Yes, please. And maybe some eggs." "You got it," she said, scribbling on her pad. Her name tag read Linda. As I ate, I noticed a man sitting a few booths away, quietly watching me over his newspaper. He looked to be in his late 40s, rough around the edges, but with kind eyes that carried a certain sadness. When our gazes met, he smiled faintly and nodded, then went back to his paper. I didn't think much of it until Linda returned and said, "That guy over there, he asked if he could pay for your breakfast." I blinked, surprised. "What? Why?" She shrugged. "Said you looked like someone who could use a small kindness." I turned to look at him again, and this time he gave a small wave. I hesitated, then stood and walked over. "You didn't have to do that," I said softly. He folded his newspaper, smiling. "Maybe not, but sometimes you do what you wish someone had done for you." There was something in his tone that told me he understood more than he said. He extended his hand. "Name's Dak." "Maggie," I replied, shaking it. We talked for a while, nothing deep at first, just weather, the town, the coffee being too bitter. But gradually, something in his voice made me curious. He mentioned he used to be a firefighter, retired now after an injury. When I told him about my house burning down, his expression softened. "That's rough," he said quietly. "Fire doesn't just take wood and furniture. It takes memories, moments, the smell of your life." I looked down at my hands. "You sound like you've been there." He nodded. "Yeah. Locked my place 3 years ago. Electrical fault. I was the one supposed to stop fires, not become the victim of one." We both laughed softly at the irony, though there was pain behind it. There was a strange comfort in talking to someone who didn't treat me like I was broken, someone who knew that sometimes life doesn't just fall apart, it collapses, and leaves you standing in the dust, unsure if you're meant to rebuild or walk away. Jack told me about a small community rebuilding project he volunteered with, restoring old homes for families who'd lost theirs to a storm. He said, "It's nothing fancy. We work weekends, fix what we can. Sometimes the best way to heal is by helping someone else find home again." Something about that line hit me hard. Maybe because for weeks I'd been clinging to the idea of getting back what I lost, but maybe the real healing was in giving forward. When I told him I had nowhere to go and no job to return to, he smiled. "Then you've got nothing to lose by joining us this weekend. We could use an extra pair of hands, and you look like you could use a reason to keep going." I almost said no. Part of me still wanted to hide, to wallow, to stay small and unseen. But another part, the part that had carried me through that fire, that long night at Tom's house, that lonely diner booth, whispered, "Try." So I agreed. That weekend, I went with Jack to a small town about 30 miles away. The air there smelled of sawdust and fresh paint. Volunteers were rebuilding an old farmhouse for a widow and her two little kids who'd lost their home to a storm. The first time I picked up a hammer, my hands trembled. I hadn't built anything before. Not walls, not roofs, not even confidence. But the other volunteers smiled, guiding me patiently. And slowly, as the hours passed, I began to feel something shift inside me. Every nail I hammered, every brushstroke of paint, every board lifted into place, it was like piecing together fragments of myself. By the end of the day, my arms ached and my shirt was streaked with sweat and dust, but my heart felt lighter. I sat on the porch steps, watching the sunset bleed orange and gold across the sky. The widow brought me lemonade and said softly, "Thank you. I don't even know your name, but thank you." Tears welled in my eyes. "It's Maggie." She smiled. "Maggie, you've got a good heart. Don't ever let anyone make you doubt that." That night, as I drove back with Jack, the road ahead shimmered with the last light of dusk. He glanced at me and said, "You did good today. You've got strength in you. You just forgot where you left it." I smiled faintly. Maybe I'm starting to remember. When we reached the motel, he dropped me off and said, "See you next weekend?" "Yeah, see you next weekend." As I walked back into my room, exhaustion tugged at my limbs, but so did something else, a quiet pride. For the first time since the fire, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a survivor. The ashes of my old life still clung to me, but now they didn't just remind me of loss, they reminded me of what could grow after. 2 weeks passed, and the routine with Jack and the volunteers became my quiet rhythm, my way of breathing again. I'd wake early, drink a cheap cup of motel coffee, tie my hair back, and drive out to whichever house we were helping that week. For those few hours under the open sky, surrounded by sawdust and laughter, I almost forgot the ache inside me. Jack had a way of keeping the mood light. He'd hum old country tunes while he worked, tease me gently about my cricket hammering, and share stories from his firefighting days. Somewhere between the hammer strikes and the sunsets, I began to feel something that had been missing for a long time: belonging. Then, one Friday afternoon, everything shifted again. I had just returned to my motel room after a long day of painting. My arms were sore, my nails speckled white, and all I wanted was a shower and sleep. The phone on the bedside table started ringing. I frowned. Almost no one had this number. Maybe Jack. I picked it up. "Hello?" There was silence for a second. Then a familiar voice. "Maggie?" I froze. That voice. That tone. It was Tom. My heart dropped into my stomach. For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. Then I said quietly, "How did you get this number?" He hesitated. "Linda, the woman from the diner, she told me you were staying here. I didn't mean to bother you. I needed to talk." I sat down on the edge of the bed, gripping the phone tighter. "You made it pretty clear you didn't want to see me again, Tom. What's there left to say?" "Maggie," he began, his voice trembling. "I'm sorry. You have to believe that. What I did, it wasn't right. I panicked. I thought I was protecting my family, but I was a coward. You're my sister. I should have been there for you." His words cracked slightly, but I stayed silent. I had imagined this moment so many times, dreamed of hearing him admit he was wrong. Yet now all I felt was exhaustion. I'd cried every tear I had weeks ago. He continued, "Sarah left me. She said she couldn't handle the guilt, said what we did to you made her feel like a monster. She packed up and went to her mother's." A bitter part of me wanted to say, "Good," but another part, the one that had spent a lifetime forgiving, just whispered, "Of course she did." "Tom," I said slowly, "you didn't just turn me away from your house. You turned me away from the only family I had left. Do you have any idea what that felt like?" "I do now. Every day since that night. I keep seeing your face at the door, the look in your eyes. I thought I was doing what was best for Sarah, but all I did was destroy the last person who ever loved me unconditionally." I leaned back, closing my eyes. The ache in his voice was real, but the wound he left was deeper than a simple apology could touch. "I'm not angry anymore, Tom. Not really. But I can't go back to who I was. You burned that bridge when you closed the door." There was a long silence on the line. Then he said, "I understand. I just, I wanted you to know the house insurance paid out. You're still listed on Mom and Dad's will, so technically half the property is yours. I can sign it over if you want. You could rebuild there. Start again." I let out a small, humorless laugh. "Rebuild where everything was lost? No, Tom. Some things aren't meant to be rebuilt. They're meant to be remembered." He sighed heavily. "You sound stronger." "I am, because I had to be." Before hanging up, he said one last thing. "I'm sorry, Maggie, for everything." And I whispered, "I know." When the call ended, I sat in silence for a long time, the phone still in my hand. The walls around me felt heavier, the air thicker. My brother's voice lingered like smoke, familiar, suffocating, impossible to ignore. A soft knock came at the door. I startled, then heard Jack's voice. "Maggie, you okay?" I opened the door, forcing a small smile. "Yeah, just got a call I wasn't expecting." He studied my face for a second, reading what I didn't say. "Old ghosts?" Something like that. Without asking, he handed me a small paper bag. "Dinner. Figured you'd forget to eat." I smiled genuinely this time. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," he said with a grin. "It's just soup, and I may have oversalted it." We sat on the small table by the window, eating quietly. Outside, rain began to fall, streaking the glass with silver lines. I found myself staring at the reflection of the neon motel sign, thinking of Tom, alone in his fancy house, surrounded by everything money could buy and nothing that could heal him. Jack broke the silence softly. You know, sometimes life doesn't give you closure. It just gives you a choice. Stay bitter or get better. I looked at him, smiling faintly. You sound like someone who's had to make that choice. He chuckled. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just someone who's learned that ashes can make good soil if you're patient enough. That night, long after he left, I lay awake listening to the rain. For the first time, I didn't cry. I didn't replay what Tom did or imagine what I'd say differently. I just breathed. Because even though my brother's apology came too late, it didn't undo the person I had become. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't about letting him back in. It was about letting myself out. Out of the pain, out of the memory, out of the fire that still burned inside me. And in that quiet motel room, surrounded by the simple hum of life, I finally exhaled the past. The days after Tom's call felt quieter, lighter somehow, like the air after a heavy storm. The ache was still there, but duller, less cruel. It didn't own me anymore. I still worked with Jack and the volunteers every weekend, painting walls, sanding old floors, planting gardens in places that had once been rubble. And with every nail and brushstroke, I felt my soul stitching itself back together. One Sunday afternoon, we were finishing up the last touches on a little blue house near the edge of town, the one that belonged to a single mother named Alicia and her 3 kids. The smell of fresh paint lingered in the air, mixed with the laughter of children running barefoot through the yard. I was planting daisies by the front porch when a car pulled up. A woman stepped out. She looked familiar, her posture straight but her face nervous. "Maggie?" she called softly. I stood up, wiping my hands on my jeans. When I saw her clearly, my stomach turned. It was Sarah, my brother's fiancée, the woman who had turned me away. For a moment, I couldn't speak. All the old emotions, betrayal, humiliation, heartbreak, rushed back like heat from a forgotten flame. She hesitated, clutching a small purse to her chest. "Please don't walk away. I needed to see you." Jack, sensing the tension, quietly moved the kids inside and gave me a look that said, "Take your time." I stayed still, staring at her, unsure whether to scream or cry. "What do you want, Sarah?" I asked finally, my voice steady but cold. She swallowed hard. "I know I'm the last person you want to see, and I don't blame you, but I couldn't live with it. What we did to you. Tom and I were supposed to be a family, but the way we treated you, it broke something in me. I left him because I couldn't stand the guilt." Her eyes filled with tears, and for the first time, she looked human to me. Not the polished, controlling woman I had met before, but someone fragile and full of regret. "I don't need your apology," I said quietly. "You made your choice." "I know, but I also came to bring you something." She opened her purse and took out an envelope, thick and slightly crumpled. "Tom wanted you to have this. He didn't know how to reach you again. It's the insurance money, your half. He insisted." I stared at it, my pulse quickening. For a long time, I had dreamed of rebuilding my home. But standing here now, surrounded by laughter, sunlight, and the scent of daisies, I realized I no longer needed the old house to feel whole. Still, this envelope represented something deeper. Not money, but accountability. A quiet, late gesture of remorse. I took it slowly. Tell him I hope he finds peace." She nodded, tears streaking down her cheeks. "And you, Maggie, I hope you find home again, wherever that may be." When she left, I stood for a long time, staring at the daisies. The world felt strangely still. Then Jack came back out, wiping his hands on a rag. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said softly. "I think I just got the last piece of my past back." He smiled gently. "What are you going to do with it?" I looked at the envelope again, feeling its weight in my hand. Something good, something that matters. That night, back in the motel, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the families we'd helped, the way their faces lit up when they saw a finished roof, a painted wall, a garden blooming where there used to be ashes. I thought about Mrs. Jenkins, my neighbor, who had taken me in the night my house burned down. I thought about Jack and the volunteers giving their weekends to help strangers rebuild. And then an idea began to form. A wild, trembling, beautiful idea. The next morning, I called Jack. "What if we start something bigger?" I said breathlessly. "Not just volunteering here and there, but a full program for people who've lost everything like we did. A place they can stay, rebuild, learn skills, find work. Call it the Phoenix Project." Jack was silent for a few seconds. Then he chuckled softly. "Rising from the ashes, huh? I like it. We could use the insurance money to buy a small piece of land, a few tiny homes, workshops, gardens, a place to start over." By the end of that call, the idea wasn't just a dream, it was a plan. Over the next few weeks, everything seemed to align. Jack knew people, builders, donors, even a local journalist who loved the concept. We found a cheap, unused lot just outside town. I used half the money to secure it and the other half to buy supplies. The first day we broke ground, I stood on the uneven soil and felt something stir inside me. The same fire that had once destroyed me, now burning as determination. Jack placed his hand on my shoulder and smiled. "Look at you, building a home out of your heartbreak." I laughed softly. Maybe that's what it was all for. The days that followed were long and exhausting, hauling lumber, making calls, filling forms, but I didn't mind. Every hammer strike echoed like a heartbeat. Every brick laid felt like redemption. And when the first cabin finally stood, sunlight gleaming off its roof, I cried, not from sadness, but from gratitude. This wasn't the life I had planned. It was better, because it was mine. And though I had lost everything, my house, my brother's love, my old life, I had gained something far more powerful, a reason to keep living. 6 months later, the land that once lay empty and forgotten had become something extraordinary. Rows of tiny homes stood under the golden Carolina sun, their roofs gleaming, their porches lined with hanging flower baskets. A large wooden sign stood at the entrance, carved with steady hands and painted carefully by the volunteers. The Phoenix Project, where new beginnings rise. Every morning, the place buzzed with life. Laughter, hammering, music, and the smell of coffee brewing in the communal kitchen. The first residents were families who'd lost everything to fires, floods, and storms. Some were widows, some were veterans, and some were young couples starting over after tragedy. Each had a story that mirrored mine, a story of loss, survival, and the stubborn will to keep going. And every time I walked through the narrow gravel paths between the houses, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Real, quiet peace. Jack became my partner in every sense of the word. He handled the logistics, the building side, and I managed the heart, listening to the residents, helping them find jobs, writing letters to donors, and telling our story to anyone who'd listen. A few months later, a local news channel did a segment on us. They called it "The Woman Who Built Hope from Ashes." When the camera crew came to interview me, I stood by the first house we had completed, the one where the widow Alicia and her kids still lived. As the cameras rolled, I found myself saying words I hadn't planned. Sometimes losing everything isn't the end. It's just the way life clears space for something greater to begin. After that, donations began to pour in. A retired teacher sent her pension check, a group of high school students came on weekends to paint, churches donated furniture, and a nearby restaurant delivered free meals every Sunday. The project grew faster than I ever imagined, from 3 houses to 8, then to 12. Every new home built felt like a prayer answered. But with every triumph, there was still one shadow that lingered in the corners of my heart. My brother, Tom. I hadn't heard from him since the call months ago. Sometimes I wondered if he'd moved away or if guilt had silenced him for good. A part of me hoped he was doing okay. Another part of me didn't want to know. I had made peace with the past, but deep down, family ties never really disappear. They just wait in quiet corners of your soul. Then, one late afternoon, as the sun bled orange across the sky, a familiar car pulled up by the main entrance. My breath caught in my throat. It was Tom. He stepped out slowly, looking older, thinner. His eyes found mine across the field, and for a moment, neither of us moved. Then he walked toward me, each step cautious, like approaching a wounded animal. "Maggie," he said softly when he reached me. "You built this?" I nodded. "With some help, yeah." He looked around, taking in the small houses, the laughter of children, the sound of hammers. "It's beautiful," he whispered. You're incredible." I crossed my arms, unsure what to say. "What are you doing here, Tom?" He sighed deeply. "I came to see what you did with your half of the money. I had to see it for myself. I thought I don't know, maybe you'd built another house for yourself, but you did something I never could have imagined. You built homes for other people." I didn't answer. My throat felt tight. He went on. "I've been volunteering at the local shelter the past few months, trying to do something good too. I guess watching you from afar made me realize how small my life had become. I thought success meant a big house and security, but it means nothing when you can't even open your door to your own sister." I looked at him then, really looked at him. The arrogance was gone. The guilt in his eyes was raw and real. "I don't hate you, Tom. I never did. I just couldn't carry the pain anymore." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I know. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to say thank you for being stronger than me." Something in those words melted the last bit of ice left in my heart. Without thinking, I stepped forward and hugged him. It wasn't a dramatic embrace, just quiet, trembling forgiveness between two people who had lost and found themselves in different ways. When I pulled back, I smiled faintly. "You don't need to thank me, just promise me one thing. Next time someone knocks on your door, open it." He smiled through glassy eyes. "I will." Jack came over then, wiping his hands on his jeans. "You must be Tom," he said with a polite smile. "Heard a lot about you." Tom chuckled awkwardly. "I bet not all good things." Jack grinned. "Depends who's telling the story." For the first time, Tom laughed, a small, broken laugh that felt like release. We spent the rest of the evening walking through the settlement. I showed him the gardens, the kitchen, the workshop. He shook hands with residents, complimented their work, and even helped a boy fix a fence. When he left that night, I knew something inside both of us had finally healed. As the sun set, Jack and I stood side by side, watching the horizon glow like embers. He smiled softly. "You did it." "No," I replied. "We did." He smiled. "And to think, it all started with the fire." I looked out at the tiny homes, smoke rising from their chimneys and soft curls against the fading light. "Yeah," I whispered. "But this time, it's a fire that keeps people warm." That night, As I walked back to my small cottage, one built by my own hands, I realized the pain that had once consumed me had finally burned out. What was left wasn't emptiness. It was strength, purpose, and peace. The fire had taken my home, but it had given me something far greater: a new beginning, a new family, and the courage to rise from the ashes. A year had passed since the night my world turned to smoke and cinders. Sometimes it still felt like a dream, one I couldn't quite wake from. But then I'd step outside my little cottage in the morning, smell the faint sweetness of blooming jasmine, hear the laughter of children echoing across the Phoenix Project, and I'd remember that everything I had now was real. Real and built from the very ashes that once tried to destroy me. Each sunrise painted the sky in soft gold, and every day I found something new to be grateful for. The sound of nails being hammered into new homes, the chatter of volunteers, the faces of families who finally had roofs over their heads. I wasn't just living anymore, I was alive. And that was something I hadn't felt in years. My brother Tom visited often now. He never came empty-handed, sometimes bringing tools, sometimes fresh bread his wife baked, and once a small framed picture of our parents' old house. "I thought you might want to keep it here," he said, quietly, placing it in my hands. I stared at it for a long time, my throat tight. The picture was slightly faded, but in it, our family stood together on the porch, laughing, whole, and unbroken. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel pain looking at it. I felt peace. Tom had changed. He volunteered every weekend at the site, working alongside Jack, helping build new homes for others. One afternoon, I caught him teaching a young boy how to swing a hammer properly. The boy asked, "Did you build this place?" Tom had smiled softly. "No," he said. "My sister did. I just help now." That single sentence was worth more than any apology. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned 1,000 shades of amber, we all gathered in the communal garden for the first year celebration of the Phoenix Project. There were fairy lights strung between the trees, tables filled with homemade dishes, and laughter that rolled across the fields like music. When it was my turn to speak, I stood on the small wooden stage we had built, the same one where we had first cut the ribbon months ago. My heart raced as I looked around at the faces lit by the warm glow of lanterns. Survivors, builders, dreamers, family. I used to think losing my home was the worst thing that could ever happen to me. And for a while it was. That night, when the fire took everything I had, I thought it also took me. But I was wrong. Because sometimes life has to burn away everything you think you need so it can give you what you truly deserve. A soft murmur went through the crowd. I smiled through tears. This place, these homes, are proof that hope doesn't die in the fire. It's born from it. Every single one of you standing here is living proof that tragedy can be transformed into something beautiful. That love and kindness can rebuild anything, even a heart that's been broken. I paused, glancing toward Tom, who was standing near the back with his hands in his pockets, eyes shining. Then toward Jack, who gave me a reassuring nod. And finally, I said, my voice steadying, "If you ever find yourself in the ashes, lost, hurt, or alone, remember this: you are stronger than what tried to destroy you, and one day you'll rise too." The crowd erupted in applause. Some were crying, Others smiled through tears. Jack slipped his arm around me as I stepped down from the stage, whispering, "You've lit more fires of hope than you'll ever know." That night, as the music played and the stars came out one by one, I found a quiet moment to walk to the edge of the field. The air was cool, the scent of bonfire wood thick and comforting. I watched the flames dance in the distance, no longer the enemy I once feared, but an old teacher, now tamed and gentle. Fire had taken my past, yes, but it had also given me clarity. It had stripped me bare, forcing me to face who I was without walls, furniture, or family wealth. And in that rawness, I had found my true strength, not in what I had, but in what I could give. As I stood there, Tom came and joined me quietly. We didn't speak for a long time. The silence between us wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. Finally, he said, "You know, I never told you this, but I started therapy. The guilt, it was too much. I had to learn how to be a better man." I looked at him, smiling faintly. "You already are, Tom. We both are." He nodded, his eyes glistening. "You're right. We both rose from it." He squeezed my hand once, before walking back toward the lights, leaving me standing there watching the flames flicker against the night sky. The stars shimmered above, quiet witnesses to all that had burned, all that had healed, and all that had begun again. I took one deep breath, letting the night fill my lungs, and whispered to the universe, "Thank you." Because sometimes the fire that destroys you isn't your ending, it's your beginning. And as the music faded into the soft hum of crickets, I knew one truth would forever remain. My house burned down, yes, but from those ashes, I found my home again.